Chapter 1. Chapter 1. The Gathering Storm. The last echoes of laughter faded into the cool evening air as Paige glanced back at the flickering lights of their hometown, a distant memory now swallowed by the encroaching darkness. Just hours ago, they had been at the diner, sharing fries and secrets, the weight of the world lifted by the camaraderie of friendship. But now, as they drove deeper into the woods, the atmosphere shifted, thickening with an unspoken tension that clung to them like the mist rising from the ground. The abandoned cabin awaited them, a relic of whispered tales and ghostly legends, and with it, the promise of a weekend that would change everything. As the car rolled to a stop, the engine's hum faded, leaving only the rustle of leaves and the distant call of an owl. The five friends stepped out, their breath visible in the chilly air, mingling with the scent of damp earth and pine. The cabin loomed before them, its weathered wood and broken windows casting long shadows in the moonlight. It was a place of secrets, and each of them carried their own. "Are you sure this is the right place?" Ashley asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering not just from the cold but from the eerie stillness that enveloped them. "Of course it is," Brad replied, his bravado a thin veneer over his own unease. He stepped forward, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the darkness, illuminating the cabin's sagging porch. "This is where the fun begins." Caitlin rolled her eyes, though a smile tugged at her lips. "Fun? You mean terrifying. I can already feel the ghosts watching us." She stepped closer to Mary-Kate, who stood silently, her gaze fixed on the cabin as if it held the answers to questions she hadn't yet asked. "Come on, it is just an old cabin," Paige said, trying to inject some enthusiasm into the group. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the crisp air, and stepped forward. "Let's make some memories." As they approached the door, the wood creaked ominously beneath their weight. Brad pushed it open, the hinges protesting with a groan that echoed through the empty space. The interior was dimly lit by the moonlight filtering through the broken windows, casting ghostly shapes on the floor. Dust motes danced in the air, and the musty smell of decay filled their nostrils. "Welcome to our haunted getaway," Brad announced, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he flicked on a flashlight, illuminating the room. The beam revealed peeling wallpaper and furniture draped in white sheets, like ghosts waiting to be awakened. "Charming," Ashley muttered, her eyes darting around as if expecting something to leap out at her. "Just what I wanted for a weekend retreat." "Stop being such a scaredy cat," Caitlin teased, nudging her playfully. "It's all in good fun. Besides, what's a little haunting among friends?" Mary-Kate remained quiet, her expression unreadable as she stepped further into the cabin. The air felt charged around her, as if the walls themselves were alive with stories waiting to be told. She could sense the weight of her friends' expectations, the unspoken pressure to enjoy this trip, but her heart felt heavy with something else. Something she couldn't quite name. "Let's set up the sleeping bags," Paige suggested, breaking the tension. "We can tell ghost stories later. Right now, let's make this place feel a little less haunted." As they unpacked their gear, the atmosphere shifted again, a subtle undercurrent of anxiety threading through their laughter. Each friend was lost in their own thoughts, grappling with insecurities that had been buried beneath the surface. Paige busied herself with arranging the sleeping bags, her mind racing. She had always been the glue of the group, the one who held everyone together, but lately, she felt the cracks forming. She glanced at Brad, who was joking with Caitlin, and her heart sank. There was a spark between them that she couldn't ignore, a flicker of something that made her stomach twist with jealousy. "Hey, you okay?" Ashley's voice broke through her reverie. She stood beside Paige, concern etched on her face. "You seem distant." "Yeah, I'm fine," Paige replied, forcing a smile. Just thinking about how we're going to survive the night in this creepy place. Ashley raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. You sure it is just the cabin? You've been acting weird lately. Paige opened her mouth to respond but hesitated. She didn't want to burden her friends with her feelings, especially not now. I'm just excited, that's all, she said finally, her voice light. Let's just enjoy the weekend. Meanwhile, Mary-Kate had wandered to a corner of the room, her fingers brushing against the rough wood of the wall. She felt a strange pull toward the cabin, as if it were calling to her. The stories she had heard about this place echoed in her mind. Tales of lost souls and unfinished business. She shivered, not from the cold, but from the weight of the past pressing down on her. Hey, Mary-Kate, come help us with the fire, Brad called, breaking her reverie. She turned to see him standing by the fireplace, a pile of kindling in his arms. His smile was warm, but there was a flicker of something else in his eyes. A challenge, perhaps, or an invitation. Sure, she replied, shaking off the strange feeling. As she joined him, she caught a glimpse of Caitlin and Ashley whispering together, their laughter ringing out like chimes in the stillness. A pang of longing shot through her. She wanted to be part of that lightness, to share in their joy. As they gathered around the fireplace, the atmosphere shifted once more. The fire crackled to life, casting flickering shadows on the walls, and for a moment the cabin felt alive. They settled onto the floor, the warmth of the flames wrapping around them like a comforting blanket. Okay, who's going first? Brad asked, a mischievous glint in his eye. Let's hear some ghost stories. I'll go, Caitlin exclaimed, her enthusiasm infectious. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. So, there's this legend about a girl who went missing in these woods. As Caitlin spun her tale, the others leaned in, captivated. The firelight danced across their faces, illuminating their expressions of awe and fear. But as the story unfolded, Paige felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The shadows seemed to grow longer, the whispers of the woods creeping closer. When Caitlin finished, the group erupted into nervous laughter, but Paige couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The stories were just that. Stories. But the air felt charged with an energy she couldn't explain. Okay, my turn, Ashley said, her voice trembling slightly. There's a story about a couple who came here for fun and adventure. Chapter 2. Chapter 2. Shadows of the Past. The wind howled through the trees, a mournful sound that echoed the unspoken fears of 5 friends huddled together in the dim light of the abandoned cabin. In the previous chapter, Paige, Brad, Ashley, Caitlin, and Mary-Kate had arrived at this isolated retreat, drawn by the thrill of the unknown and the whispers of a haunted past. The air had been thick with tension, each of them carrying their own secrets and insecurities. Now, as they stood in the shadowy interior, the weight of their surroundings pressed down on them, amplifying their unvoiced anxieties. The cabin was a relic of time, its wooden beams creaking under the strain of age, and the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves lingered in the air. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that filtered through the grimy windows, illuminating the remnants of a life once lived. Old photographs adorned the walls, their edges curling like the memories they held. Faces frozen in time, smiles that seemed to mock the present. Look at this one, Caitlin said, her voice barely above a whisper as she picked up a faded photograph from a rickety table. The image depicted a family, their expressions a mix of joy and something darker that lurked just beneath the surface. They look so happy, don't they? Yeah, until you remember why we're here, Brad replied, his tone laced with sarcasm. Haunted cabin, tragic history, all that jazz. Come on, Brad, Ashley interjected, rolling her eyes. Can't you just be a little less? You. We're supposed to be having fun. Paige stood apart from the group, her heart racing as she examined the photograph. The woman in the picture bore a striking resemblance to her mother, a thought that sent a shiver down her spine. She could almost hear her mother's voice echoing in her mind, urging her to be perfect, to achieve greatness. But what did that even mean? As the weight of her family's expectations pressed down on her, she felt a growing sense of unease. Who was she, really? Hey, Paige, you okay? Mary-Kate's voice broke through her reverie, concern etched on her face. Yeah, just thinking, Paige replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Thinking about what? Caitlin asked, her curiosity piqued. Nothing important, Paige said, brushing off the question. She didn't want to burden them with her doubts, not when the atmosphere was already so charged. Suddenly, a crack of thunder rumbled outside, shaking the cabin's foundations. The friends exchanged nervous glances, the playful banter evaporating like mist in the morning sun. Looks like we're in for a storm, Brad said, peering out the window. The sky had darkened ominously, clouds swirling like a tempestuous sea. Great. Just what we need, Ashley muttered, crossing her arms. Stuck in a creepy cabin with a bunch of ghosts and a storm. Perfect. Let's just find something to do, Caitlin suggested, trying to lighten the mood. How about we explore a bit more? There might be more interesting stuff around here. Or we could just sit and wait for the storm to pass, Brad countered, his tone dismissive. Come on, don't be such a downer, Mary-Kate chimed in, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Let's see what else we can find. Who knows? Maybe we'll uncover some dark family secrets. Paige felt a flicker of unease at the thought. The last thing she wanted was to delve into the past, especially when her own identity felt so fragile. But the group's energy was infectious, and she found herself nodding in agreement. Okay, let's explore, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. As they moved deeper into the cabin, the air grew heavier, thick with the scent of mildew and something else. Something sweet and decayed. They stumbled upon a small room at the back, its door slightly ajar. Inside, the walls were lined with shelves filled with dusty books and trinkets, remnants of a life long forgotten. Wow, look at this! Caitlin exclaimed, holding up a delicate porcelain figurine of a woman in a flowing dress. It's beautiful. Yeah, if you like creepy old stuff, Brad scoffed, but even he couldn't hide his intrigue. Paige wandered over to a stack of letters, their edges yellowed with age. She picked one up, the paper crinkling in her hands as she unfolded it. The handwriting was elegant, yet the words were laced with sorrow. My dearest Eleanor, I fear the shadows are closing in on me. The whispers grow louder each night, and I can no longer tell where the past ends and the present begins. If you find this, know that I loved you fiercely, even as the darkness consumed me. Paige's heart raced as she read the words, a chill creeping down her spine. The letter felt like a confession, a glimpse into a tortured soul. She glanced at her friends, who were now engrossed in their own discoveries, oblivious to the weight of the letter in her hands. Paige, what did you find? Mary-Kate asked, her voice breaking the spell. Just a letter, Paige replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated, the urge to share the haunting words battling with her desire to keep the darkness at bay. It's nothing. Nothing. Come on, read it to us. Caitlin urged, her eyes wide with excitement. Paige bit her lip, the tension in the room palpable. She could feel the storm brewing outside, the wind howling like a banshee, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch and twist, eager to consume them all. Okay, she relented, her voice trembling slightly as she began to read the letter aloud. As the words spilled from her lips, the atmosphere shifted. The playful banter faded, replaced by an eerie silence that hung heavy in the air. Each sentence felt like a thread weaving them closer to the tragic history of the cabin, and with it, the shadows of their own pasts. When she finished, the room was still. The only sound was the distant rumble of thunder, a reminder of the storm raging outside. "Wow," Ashley finally said, breaking the silence. "That's intense." "Yeah, but it is just a letter," Brad said, trying to sound nonchalant, though his eyes betrayed his unease. "People write dramatic stuff all the time." "Maybe, but it feels like it is connected to this place," Caitlin said, her voice low. "Like it is trying to tell us something." Paige felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The words echoed in her mind, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being drawn into something. Chapter 3. The haunting begins. The storm raged outside, its howling winds clawing at the cabin's wooden frame like a desperate child seeking refuge. Inside, the flickering candlelight cast long shadows that danced across the walls, illuminating the faces of 5 friends who had come seeking adventure but now found themselves ensnared in a web of fear and uncertainty. Paige, Brad, Ashley, Caitlin, and Mary-Kate huddled together, their laughter from earlier now replaced by an uneasy silence. The air was thick with tension, and each creak of the floorboards seemed to echo their unspoken fears. Paige, still reeling from the weight of her family's expectations and her own insecurities, sat on the edge of a worn-out armchair, her fingers nervously tracing the frayed fabric. She had hoped this weekend would be a chance to escape, to find herself amidst the chaos of her life, but instead, she felt more lost than ever. The cabin, with its peeling wallpaper and dusty corners, seemed to reflect her own internal struggle. A place frozen in time, haunted by memories that refused to fade. As the storm intensified, the group had decided to explore the cabin, uncovering old photographs and letters that hinted at a tragic history involving a previous occupant. The discovery had sparked a flicker of curiosity in Paige, but it was quickly overshadowed by the oppressive atmosphere that surrounded them. Now, as the wind howled like a banshee outside, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone. "Did you hear that?" Caitlin whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. Her wide eyes darted around the room, searching for something unseen. "Hear what?" Ashley replied, her skepticism wavering. She had always prided herself on being the rational one, the voice of reason in their group. But as the night wore on, the shadows seemed to grow darker, and the air felt charged with an energy she couldn't explain. "I thought I heard something," Caitlin insisted, her voice trembling. "Probably just the wind," Brad said, trying to sound nonchalant as he leaned back against the wall, arms crossed. But even he couldn't hide the slight quiver in his voice. "It's just an old cabin. It creaks." "Yeah, but it creaks like it is alive," Mary-Kate added, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. "What if it is haunted?" Ashley rolled her eyes, but the doubt in her mind was beginning to gnaw at her. "Come on, guys. Ghosts aren't real. It's just our imaginations running wild. We're all just a little on edge because of the storm." But as the night deepened, strange occurrences began to unfold. A book that had been left untouched on the shelf suddenly toppled to the floor, its pages fluttering open as if caught in an unseen breeze. The sound echoed through the cabin, sending a shiver down Paige's spine. She exchanged a glance with Caitlin, who looked as though she might bolt for the door at any moment. "Okay, that was weird," Brad admitted, his bravado faltering. "Maybe we should just stick together." "Agreed," Paige said, her heart racing. "Let's not split up. We can play a game or something to take our minds off whatever that was. Or we could tell ghost stories," Mary-Kate suggested, her eyes sparkling with a mix of fear and thrill. "You know, to really get into the spirit of things." Ashley shot her a look. That's not helping. Maybe it is, Caitlin chimed in, her voice barely above a whisper. What if we learn something about the cabin? Something that explains all of this. The group fell silent, the weight of their surroundings pressing down on them. The wind howled outside, and the shadows seemed to stretch and twist, as if they were alive. Paige felt a chill run down her spine, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the cabin was watching them, waiting for them to uncover its secrets. Fine, Ashley relented, her voice tinged with reluctance. But let's keep it light, okay? No one wants to freak out more than we already are. As they settled in a circle on the floor, the flickering candlelight casting eerie shapes on the walls, Mary-Kate began to recount a local legend about the cabin. They say it was built over an old burial ground, she said, her voice low and conspiratorial. And that the spirits of those buried there still roam these woods, looking for something they lost. Like what? Brad asked, his skepticism returning. A lost sock. Maybe they're looking for revenge, Caitlin whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Or maybe they just want to be remembered. Paige felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The idea of spirits lingering in the cabin, trapped between worlds, sent a shiver through her. What if they're angry? She asked, her voice trembling. What if they don't want us here? Ashley scoffed, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. That's just a story. We're fine. We're just here for a weekend getaway, remember? But as the night wore on, the atmosphere grew heavier, and the strange occurrences escalated. A door creaked open on its own, and the sound of soft whispers echoed through the cabin, sending the group into a frenzy. They huddled closer together, their hearts racing as they exchanged terrified glances. Okay, this is getting ridiculous, Ashley said, her voice shaky. We need to stop this. It's just our imaginations. Is it? Caitlin shot back, her voice rising in panic. What if it is not? What if we're really not alone? Guys, let's just breathe, Brad said, trying to maintain some semblance of calm. We're all just a little freaked out. It's the storm, the cabin. It is all just messing with our heads. But as he spoke, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen, causing them all to jump. They exchanged terrified looks, and Paige felt her heart race. What was that? She whispered, her voice barely audible. I'll go check, Brad said, his bravado faltering. He stood up, his body tense as he moved toward the kitchen. The others watched him, their breaths held in anticipation. Be careful, Mary-Kate called after him, her voice trembling. As Brad stepped into the kitchen, the others remained behind, their hearts pounding in their chests. The seconds felt like hours as they waited for him to return. Finally, he reappeared, his face pale and eyes wide. There's something in there, he stammered. What do you mean? Ashley asked, her voice rising in panic. I don't know, Brad replied, his voice shaky. But the cabinets. They're all open. Like someone was looking for something. Maybe it was just the wind, Ashley suggested, but even she didn't sound convinced. Chapter 4. Chapter 4. Breaking point. The storm raged outside, a cacophony of wind and rain that rattled the old cabin's wooden bones. Inside, the air was thick with unspoken words and unresolved tensions. Paige, Brad, Ashley, Caitlin, and Mary-Kate had spent the previous night huddled together, sharing ghost stories and laughing nervously, but as dawn broke, the laughter faded, replaced by a heavy silence. Each friend was lost in their own thoughts, the weight of the cabin's tragic history pressing down on them like the storm clouds overhead. Paige felt the familiar tug of anxiety in her chest, a reminder of her family's expectations and the suffocating pressure to succeed. She glanced at Ashley, who was staring out the window, her brow furrowed in concentration. The skeptic had been unusually quiet since the strange occurrences began, and Paige could sense the shift in her friend's demeanor. Caitlin, on the other hand, seemed almost entranced by the cabin's eerie atmosphere, her eyes sparkling with a mix of fear and fascination. "Maybe we should just leave," Brad suggested, breaking the silence. His voice was low, almost drowned out by the howling wind. "This place is giving me the creeps." "Leave." Ashley turned to him, her voice sharp. "And miss out on the chance to figure out what's really going on here. You're not seriously considering that, are you?" "Maybe we should," Mary-Kate chimed in, her voice trembling slightly. "I mean, things are getting weird. I don't like it." Caitlin, sitting cross-legged on the floor, looked up from the old photograph she had been studying. "But what if there's something here that can help us? Something we can learn?" Her voice was soft but insistent, a plea for understanding that hung in the air like the dust motes swirling in the dim light. "Help us with what?" Brad shot back, frustration creeping into his tone. "You think talking to ghosts is going to solve our problems? It's not just about that." Caitlin's voice rose, her cheeks flushing with emotion. "You don't understand what it is like to feel lost, to feel like you don't belong anywhere. Maybe this is my chance to find some answers." Paige watched the exchange, her heart aching for Caitlin. She had always admired her friend's resilience, but lately, Caitlin seemed to be spiraling deeper into her insecurities. The cabin, with its haunting past, had become a refuge for her, a place where she could explore the unknown without judgment. But at what cost? "Caitlin, we're all feeling lost," Paige said gently, trying to bridge the growing divide. "But this isn't the answer. We need to stick together, not get caught up in whatever this is." "Sticking together doesn't mean ignoring the truth," Ashley interjected, her voice firm. "We can't just pretend everything is fine because we're scared." The tension in the room thickened, a palpable force that made it hard to breathe. Each friend was grappling with their own fears, their own desires, and the storm outside mirrored the tempest brewing within. "I think we should leave," Brad said again, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "We can come back another time when it is safer. Or we could just leave and never come back," Ashley countered, her eyes narrowing. "You're just scared, Brad. You're letting the stories get to you." "Maybe I am," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "But I'd rather be scared outside than trapped in here with whatever is going on." Caitlin's expression hardened, and Paige could see the hurt flash across her face. "You think I'm scared? You think I'm just looking for a thrill? This is about more than that. This is about understanding who I am. Understanding who you are." Ashley echoed, incredulous. "You think talking to ghosts is going to help you with that?" "It's not just ghosts." Caitlin's voice cracked, and for a moment, Paige thought she might cry. "It's about connecting with something bigger than myself. I feel like I'm drowning, and this is the only thing that makes sense." "Maybe you should talk to us instead," Paige suggested, her heart racing as she tried to defuse the situation. "We're your friends. We want to help you." Caitlin shook her head, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You don't get it. You all think you know me, but you don't. You see me as this girl who's just trying to fit in. But I'm so much more than that, and I need to find out who I really am." The room fell silent, the weight of Caitlin's confession hanging in the air. Paige felt a pang of guilt. She had always seen Caitlin as the strong one, the friend who could weather any storm. But now, it was clear that Caitlin was struggling, and the cabin's dark history had become a mirror reflecting her own fears. "Caitlin, we're all lost in our own ways," Mary-Kate said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But we can't let that drive us apart. We need each other now more than ever. Maybe we need to confront whatever is haunting this place, Ashley said, her tone shifting slightly. If we can face it together, maybe we can find some answers. Or we could just get the hell out of here, Brad replied, his frustration bubbling to the surface. I'm not interested in playing Ghostbusters. Then what do you want? Caitlin shot back, her voice rising again. To run away. To pretend everything is fine. That's not living, Brad. The argument escalated, voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony of emotions. Paige felt her heart race as she watched her friends tear into each other, the bonds they had forged over years of friendship fraying at the edges. She wanted to intervene, to pull them back from the brink, but the words caught in her throat. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the back of the cabin, silencing the room. The sound reverberated through the walls, a sharp reminder of the storm outside. The friends froze, their eyes wide with fear. What was that? Mary-Kate whispered, her voice trembling. Probably just the wind, Brad said, though his voice lacked conviction. No, Caitlin said, her expression shifting from anger to fear. That sounded like it came from the cellar. Let's just leave, Brad urged again, his voice rising in urgency. We can't stay here. But Caitlin was already moving toward the door, her determination igniting a spark of courage within her. I'm going to see what it is, she declared, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Caitlin, wait, Paige called out, but it was too late. Caitlin had already slipped out of the room, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Are you crazy? Ashley shouted after her. Chapter 5. Chapter 5. Into the Abyss. The storm raged outside, a cacophony of wind and rain that battered the old cabin like a relentless beast. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension, the air charged with unspoken fears and unresolved conflicts. Paige, Brad, Ashley, Caitlin, and Mary-Kate had spent the day unraveling the cabin's dark history, but as night fell, the shadows deepened, and the weight of their discoveries pressed heavily upon them. Each friend was haunted not just by the specters of the past, but by their own insecurities and desires, which had begun to surface in the flickering candlelight. As they gathered in the dimly lit living room, the flickering flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, and the old wooden floor creaked beneath their weight. The atmosphere was electric, a mix of dread and curiosity. We should try to communicate with them, Caitlin suggested, her voice barely above a whisper, yet it carried a weight that silenced the room. Maybe they can help us understand what happened here. Ashley rolled her eyes, her skepticism palpable. You really think a séance is a good idea? We're already freaked out enough without inviting more chaos. She crossed her arms, her posture defensive, as if bracing against the very idea of the supernatural. Come on, Ash, Brad chimed in, his tone light but his eyes betraying a flicker of fear. What's the worst that could happen? We sit around, hold hands, and talk to some ghosts. It's just a bit of fun. Mary-Kate, who had always been the peacemaker of the group, looked between her friends, sensing the rising tension. Maybe it could help us, she said softly, her voice steady. If we can understand what happened to them, maybe we can find a way to move on ourselves. She glanced at Paige, who was staring into the flickering flames, lost in thought. Paige's heart raced as she considered the suggestion. The weight of her family's expectations loomed large in her mind, and the idea of connecting with something beyond the physical world felt both terrifying and liberating. I'm in, she said finally, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. Let's do it. The group formed a circle, their fingers interlocking, a fragile connection forged in the face of uncertainty. The candles flickered, casting an eerie glow that seemed to pulse with their collective heartbeat. As they closed their eyes, the storm outside intensified, the wind howling like a wounded animal. Spirits of this cabin, Mary-Kate began, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "We seek your presence. We want to understand your story. Please, if you can hear us, give us a sign." Silence enveloped them, thick and suffocating. The only sound was the rain pounding against the roof, a relentless reminder of the world outside. Just as doubt began to creep in, a sudden chill swept through the room, causing the candles to flicker violently. The air grew heavy, charged with an energy that made the hairs on the back of Paige's neck stand on end. "Did you feel that?" Caitlin whispered, her voice trembling. Before anyone could respond, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen, followed by a series of soft thuds, as if something or someone was moving about. Panic surged through the group, and Ashley's grip tightened around Mary-Kate's hand. "This is insane. We need to stop." "No," Paige said, her voice rising above the chaos. "We can't back down now. We need to know what's happening." "Why are you so obsessed with this?" Ashley shot back, her frustration boiling over. "You think talking to ghosts is going to solve your problems. It's just a distraction." "Maybe it is not just about me," Paige snapped, her emotions spilling over. "Maybe it is about all of us. We're all struggling with something, and this is our chance to confront it." The tension in the room thickened, and Mary-Kate felt the weight of her friend's emotions pressing down on her. "Let's just focus," she urged, trying to maintain some semblance of calm. "We're here for a reason. Let's see what the spirits want to tell us." With a deep breath, Mary-Kate closed her eyes again, her voice steady as she continued. "Spirits, we are here. We want to hear your story. Please, show us a sign." The air crackled, and suddenly, the candles flickered violently, casting long, distorted shadows across the room. A low moan echoed through the cabin, sending chills down their spines. The sound seemed to resonate from the very walls, a mournful cry that spoke of loss and despair. "Did you hear that?" Caitlin gasped, her eyes wide with fear. "Maybe it is just the wind," Ashley said, her voice shaky, but even she couldn't hide the tremor of doubt. "No," Paige said, her heart racing. "That was real. It's them. They're trying to communicate." As if in response, a gust of wind howled through the cabin, extinguishing the candles in an instant. Darkness enveloped them, and the only sound was the pounding of their hearts. Panic surged through the group, and they fumbled to relight the candles, their hands shaking. "Guys, we need to get out of here," Ashley said, her voice rising in pitch. "This is too much." But before anyone could respond, a loud crash echoed from the back of the cabin, followed by a chilling silence. The group froze, their breaths caught in their throats. "Stay together," Mary-Kate whispered, her voice barely audible. "We can't split up." With trembling hands, they relit the candles, the flickering flames casting a fragile light in the oppressive darkness. As the shadows danced around them, they felt a presence, an energy that seemed to pulse with their fear. "Who are you?" Mary-Kate called into the darkness, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her insides. "What do you want?" The air grew colder, and a whisper echoed through the room, barely audible but unmistakable. "Leave. Now." The voice sent a shiver down Paige's spine, and she felt a surge of adrenaline. "We can't leave," she said, her voice firm. "We need to understand. We need to know what happened here." Suddenly, the candles flickered violently again, and the room was filled with a cacophony of whispers, overlapping and chaotic. Each voice seemed to carry its own pain, its own story, and Paige felt herself being pulled into the abyss of their collective sorrow. "Paige!" Brad shouted, his voice breaking through the chaos. "Get back." But it was too late. The shadows swirled around her, and she felt herself being drawn into the darkness, the whispers growing louder, drowning out her thoughts. "Help us! Help us!" they cried, their voices a haunting melody that resonated deep within her soul. Chapter 6. Chapter 6. The Descent. The storm raged outside, its howling winds and torrential rain a fitting backdrop for the turmoil brewing within the cabin. The friends had gathered in the dimly lit living room, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows that danced across the walls, reminiscent of the ghosts they had unwittingly awakened. Tension hung thick in the air, a palpable force that seemed to press down on them, suffocating and relentless. Each of them was haunted by their past mistakes, regrets manifesting as terrifying visions that threatened to tear them apart. Paige sat curled up on the worn couch, her knees drawn to her chest, staring blankly at the floor. The weight of her family's expectations felt heavier than ever, and the cabin's dark history echoed her own insecurities. Brad, seated across from her, shifted uncomfortably, guilt gnawing at him like a persistent itch he couldn't scratch. He had always been the glue that held the group together, but now, as the shadows deepened, he felt more like a splinter threatening to drive them apart. "Maybe we should just leave," Ashley suggested, her voice trembling slightly. The skeptic of the group, she had always prided herself on her rationality, but the events of the night had begun to chip away at her resolve. "This place is. It is not right. We're not safe here." "Leave," Caitlin echoed, her voice rising in disbelief. "And go where?" "Back to the town. We'd just be running away from whatever this is." Her eyes darted nervously around the room, as if expecting the very walls to close in on her. Mary-Kate, who had taken on the role of the peacemaker, glanced between her friends, her heart racing. "We can't let fear control us. We need to stick together. Whatever's happening, we can face it as a group." "Face it," Ashley scoffed, her frustration boiling over. "You think we can just confront whatever is haunting us? It's not that simple, Mary-Kate." "Enough." Brad's voice cut through the rising tide of panic. He stood, fists clenched at his sides, his jaw set in determination. "We can't keep arguing like this. We need to figure out what we're dealing with. If we're going to survive this, we need to be united." The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Each friend was lost in their thoughts, grappling with their own fears and regrets. The storm outside seemed to echo their inner turmoil, thunder rumbling ominously as if the very heavens were warning them of the descent they were about to take. "Let's talk about what we saw during the séance," Paige suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe it can help us understand what we're up against." Brad nodded, his heart racing. I saw my brother. He was angry, and I could feel his pain. I never got to say goodbye. I never got to tell him how much I cared." His voice cracked, and he swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill over. "I've been carrying that guilt for years." Caitlin leaned forward, her eyes wide with empathy. "Brad, you can't blame yourself for that. You were just a kid. You didn't know what to do." "But I should have been there for him," he insisted, his voice rising again. "I should have done something. Instead, I just let him go." The room was heavy with silence, each friend lost in their own memories. Mary-Kate reached out, placing a comforting hand on Brad's shoulder. "You're not alone in this. We all have our regrets. We just need to face them together." Ashley shifted uncomfortably, her skepticism wavering as she watched the raw emotion unfold before her. "I saw something too," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I saw my parents fighting. I thought I could fix it, but I couldn't. I just wanted them to be happy." "Maybe that's why we're here," Caitlin said softly, her voice trembling. "Maybe we're meant to confront our pasts, to find closure. But we have to do it together." As the storm raged outside, the friends began to share their fears and regrets, each confession drawing them closer together. The air crackled with tension, but it was a different kind of tension. One that hinted at healing rather than destruction. They were no longer just 5 friends trapped in a haunted cabin. They were individuals bound by their shared experiences, their vulnerabilities laid bare. But just as they began to find solace in one another, the atmosphere shifted. A cold draft swept through the room, extinguishing the candles and plunging them into darkness. Panic surged as they fumbled for their phones, the glow of screens illuminating their faces in ghostly hues. What was that? Ashley gasped, her breath hitching in her throat. Stay close. Mary-Kate urged, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. We need to stick together. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the cabin, reverberating off the walls like a warning. The friends froze, hearts pounding in unison as they strained to listen. The sound was primal, filled with rage and sorrow, and it sent chills racing down their spines. Did you hear that? Caitlin whispered, her eyes wide with terror. Yeah, Brad replied, his voice barely above a whisper. What the hell was that? Before anyone could respond, a figure emerged from the shadows, its form indistinct but undeniably menacing. The friends recoiled, instinctively stepping back as the entity loomed closer, its presence suffocating. Get back! Mary-Kate shouted, instinctively placing herself between her friends and the approaching darkness. We don't want any trouble. But the entity didn't respond to her plea. Instead, it seemed to draw closer, its form shifting and swirling like smoke. The air grew colder, and the friends could feel the weight of their regrets pressing down on them, manifesting as a tangible force. Brad, Paige whispered, her voice trembling. What if it is here for you? His heart raced as he met her gaze, the realization dawning on him. I have to face it, he said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. I can't keep running from my past. Are you sure? Caitlin asked, her eyes wide with concern. What if it is dangerous? I have to try, he insisted, stepping forward. I can't let it control me anymore. As he approached the entity, the air crackled with tension. The friends watched in a mix of fear and awe, their hearts pounding as Brad faced the darkness head-on. I'm sorry, he said, his voice steady. I'm sorry for not being there. I'm sorry for letting you down. The entity paused, its form shifting as if considering his words. The growl subsided, replaced by a low, mournful wail. Chapter 7. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. The storm raged outside, a cacophony of wind and rain that battered the old cabin like a relentless beast. Inside, the air was thick with fear and uncertainty, the flickering candlelight casting dancing shadows on the walls, each flicker a reminder of the darkness that had seeped into their lives. The friends huddled together, their faces pale and drawn, haunted by the events of the past few hours. They had awakened something in the cabin. Something that had turned their weekend getaway into a nightmare. Paige felt the weight of her family's expectations pressing down on her like a heavy shroud. She had always been the responsible one, the one who kept the group together, but now she felt more like a burden. Brad, who had tried to be the brave one, was now visibly shaken, his hands trembling as he gripped the edge of the table. Caitlin, lost in her own thoughts, stared blankly at the floor, while Mary-Kate's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape that didn't exist. And Ashley, the skeptic, who had once dismissed the supernatural as mere folklore, now found herself questioning everything she thought she knew. Maybe we should just leave, Caitlin whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. This place is cursed. No, Paige said, her voice firm despite the tremor beneath it. We can't just run away. We need to face whatever is happening here. Face it, Ashley scoffed, her skepticism crumbling under the weight of their reality. What do you think we're dealing with? Ghosts. Demons. We're not equipped for this. Then what do you suggest? Brad shot back, his frustration boiling over. We sit here and wait for it to kill us. The tension in the room was palpable, a thick fog of fear and anger that threatened to suffocate them. Each friend was grappling with their own demons, and the entity that had been unleashed was feeding off their insecurities, their regrets, their fears. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the back of the cabin, causing everyone to jump. The sound reverberated through the walls, a reminder that they were not alone. What was that? Mary Kate's voice trembled, her eyes wide with terror. I don't know, Paige replied, her heart racing. But we need to check it out. Reluctantly, the group moved toward the source of the noise, their footsteps hesitant and cautious. The hallway was dark, the shadows seeming to stretch and twist as they passed. As they approached the door to the back room, a cold draft swept through, sending shivers down their spines. On 3, Paige whispered, her voice barely above a breath. 1, 2, 3. They flung the door open, revealing a room filled with dust and cobwebs. The window was shattered, shards of glass glinting like teeth in the dim light. But it was the sight in the center of the room that froze them in place. A mirror, cracked and tarnished, reflecting their terrified faces back at them. What is this doing here? Caitlin asked, stepping closer, her curiosity piqued despite her fear. It looks like it has been here for years, Brad said, examining the frame, which was ornate but covered in grime. Maybe it is connected to the history of the cabin. As they gathered around the mirror, a sudden chill swept through the room, and the air grew heavy with an oppressive energy. The friends exchanged nervous glances, each feeling the weight of the moment. Do you think it could show us something? Mary Kate asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Like what? Ashley replied, crossing her arms defensively. More creepy visions. No thanks. But Paige felt drawn to the mirror, an inexplicable urge to look deeper. What if it shows us how to stop this? She suggested, her voice trembling with hope. Or it could show us our worst fears, Brad countered, his brow furrowed with concern. Let's just try, Caitlin urged, stepping forward. We need to do something. With a deep breath, Paige stepped closer to the mirror, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the cold surface. As she did, the room seemed to shift, the air thickening with anticipation. Suddenly, the mirror rippled like water, and images began to swirl within its depths. They saw flashes of their past. Moments of joy, laughter, and love, but also moments of pain, betrayal, and regret. Each image struck a chord, resonating with their deepest fears. Stop it, Ashley shouted, stepping back. This isn't helping. But it was too late. The mirror had awakened something within them, forcing them to confront their darkest secrets. Look, Caitlin cried, pointing at the mirror. It's showing us. Us. The reflection shifted, revealing each of them in turn. Paige saw herself, burdened by her family's expectations, her face twisted in anguish. Brad's reflection showed a boy haunted by guilt, his eyes filled with regret. Caitlin's image revealed a girl desperate for validation, while Mary Kate's reflection was a mask of fear and uncertainty. And Ashley's reflection was the hardest to bear. It showed her as she truly was. Strong, fierce, but also deeply afraid of losing the people she loved. I can't watch this, Ashley said, tears brimming in her eyes. I can't face this. Then don't, Paige said softly, stepping closer to her friend. We're all in this together. We can't let this thing tear us apart. As the mirror continued to show their fears, the energy in the room shifted. The shadows grew darker, and a low growl echoed through the cabin, reverberating off the walls. The entity was angry, feeding off their fear, and it was growing stronger. "We need to fight back," Brad said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "We can't let it win." "Together," Mary-Kate added, her voice rising with determination. "We have to face it together." With newfound resolve, the friends formed a circle around the mirror, their hands clasped tightly. They closed their eyes, focusing on their fears, acknowledging them, but refusing to let them control them. "I am not my past," Paige said, her voice strong. "I am more than my family's expectations. I am not defined by my mistakes," Brad added, his grip tightening around Caitlin's hand. "I can change. I am worthy of love and acceptance," Caitlin declared, her voice rising above the storm outside. "I am not afraid," Mary-Kate said, her voice steady. "I will protect my friends." "I am strong," Ashley said, her voice breaking slightly. "And I will fight for those I love." As they spoke, the mirror began to crack further, the energy within it swirling violently. The growl grew louder, a cacophony of rage and despair that threatened to drown them. Chapter 8. Chapter 8. Aftermath. The storm had passed, but the air remained thick with an unsettling stillness, as if the world was holding its breath. The cabin, once a place of whispered secrets and laughter, now stood as a monument to their shared trauma. Paige, Brad, Caitlin, and Mary-Kate sat in a circle on the dusty floor, the remnants of their friendship scattered around them like the shattered pieces of their hearts. Ashley was gone, her sacrifice echoing in the silence that enveloped them. The memories of the previous night played in Paige's mind like a broken record. The frantic energy of the séance, the way the air had crackled with tension, and finally, the moment when Ashley had stepped forward, her voice steady as she faced the darkness. "I'll do it," she had said, and in that instant, Paige had felt a flicker of hope. But hope had turned to horror as the shadows had consumed her friend, leaving them with nothing but the weight of their guilt and grief. "Is it really over?" Caitlin's voice trembled, breaking the silence. She hugged her knees to her chest, her eyes darting around the room as if expecting the malevolent force to return. "What if it comes back?" "It won't," Brad replied, though his voice lacked conviction. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair, the remnants of fear still etched on his face. We faced it. We survived." "Survived," Mary-Kate echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ashley didn't survive. She's gone because of us." The weight of her words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Paige felt the sting of tears prick her eyes. "No, it is not our fault. We didn't know what would happen." But even as she spoke, doubt crept into her heart. They had been reckless, drawn to the cabin's dark allure, and now they were left with the consequences of their actions. "We should have listened to her," Caitlin said, her voice breaking. "She was the one who wanted to leave. I should have supported her." "Caitlin, you can't blame yourself," Brad said, his tone firm yet gentle. "We all made choices. We all wanted to uncover the truth. But at what cost?" Mary-Kate's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "We lost her. We lost our friend." The room fell silent again, the weight of their grief pressing down on them. Outside, the sun began to rise, casting a pale light through the grimy windows. It illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air, a stark contrast to the darkness that had enveloped them just hours before. "Maybe we should talk about it," Paige suggested, her voice trembling. "We need to process what happened. We can't just pretend it didn't." "Talk about what?" Caitlin snapped, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "How we let Ashley die. How we were too busy fighting with each other to see the danger." "No," Paige said, shaking her head. "Talk about what we felt. What we learned. We can't let her sacrifice be in vain." Brad nodded slowly, his expression softening. "She believed in us. In our friendship, we owe it to her to be honest about what we're feeling. Caitlin's shoulders slumped, the fight leaving her. Fine. But I don't know if I can do this. Mary-Kate reached out, placing a comforting hand on Caitlin's arm. We're in this together. We'll figure it out. Paige took a deep breath, steadying herself. I'll go first. I've been thinking a lot about what Ashley said before. About being true to ourselves. I've always felt like I had to live up to my parents' expectations, to be perfect. But I don't want to be that person anymore. I want to be me. Caitlin looked up, her eyes wide. You mean, you want to stop pretending? Yeah, Paige said, her voice gaining strength. I want to embrace who I really am. I want to pursue my art, not just what my family wants for me. I want to live for myself. Brad's expression softened, and he leaned forward. That's brave, Paige. I wish I could say the same. I've always felt like I had to be the strong one, the protector. But I'm not sure I can be that anymore. I feel so lost. You're not lost, Mary-Kate said, her voice steady. You're just human. We all are. We've been through something unimaginable, and it is okay to feel vulnerable. Caitlin wiped her eyes, her voice barely a whisper. I've always struggled with feeling like I'm not enough. I thought if I could just be perfect, I'd be loved. But now, I see that I've been pushing everyone away. I don't want to do that anymore. None of us are perfect, Brad said, his voice firm. We all have our flaws. But that's what makes us human. We need to accept each other for who we are, not who we think we should be. Paige felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. Ashley believed in us. She wanted us to be real with each other. We can honor her memory by being true to ourselves. As they spoke, the tension in the room began to dissipate, replaced by a fragile sense of unity. They were still grieving, still haunted by the shadows of the past, but they were also beginning to understand the importance of facing their fears and embracing their true selves. Let's make a pact, Mary-Kate said, her voice steady. Let's promise to support each other, no matter what. We'll honor Ashley by living authentically and being there for one another. I'm in, Caitlin said, her voice stronger now. Me too, Brad added, a determined look in his eyes. Paige nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. Together. As they joined hands in the center of their circle, a sense of warmth enveloped them, a flicker of light in the darkness that had threatened to consume them. They were still raw, still grieving, but they were also united in their resolve to honor Ashley's memory. The sun continued to rise outside, casting a golden glow over the cabin, illuminating the dust and shadows that had lingered for too long. It felt like a new beginning, a chance to rebuild their lives in the wake of tragedy. But as they sat in their circle, a chill swept through the room, a whisper of something unspoken lingering in the air. Paige shivered, glancing at the windows, where the trees outside swayed gently in the breeze. The woods, once a source of mystery and fear, now felt like a reminder of the darkness they had faced. Do you think it is really over? Caitlin asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, Brad admitted, his brow furrowing. But we can't let fear control us. Chapter 9. Chapter 9. The road ahead. As the first light of dawn broke through the dense canopy of trees, the remnants of last night's terror lingered in the air like a thick fog. The cabin stood silent, its dark windows like hollow eyes watching the five friends as they emerged from their nightmarish ordeal. Each of them bore the weight of loss and revelation, their hearts heavy with the memory of Ashley's sacrifice. They had entered the cabin as five, but they were leaving as four, forever changed by the shadows that had danced around them. Paige was the first to step outside, her breath hitching in her throat as she took in the familiar yet foreign landscape. The woods, once a backdrop for their laughter, now felt like a living entity, whispering secrets she could no longer ignore. She turned to her friends, their faces pale and drawn, and felt a surge of determination. They had faced the darkness together. Now, they needed to find their way back to the light. "Let's get out of here," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "We need to honor Ashley. We can't let her sacrifice be in vain." Brad nodded, his jaw clenched. "Yeah, we owe it to her." He glanced back at the cabin, a shiver running down his spine. "But we can't forget what happened here. We need to talk about it." Caitlin, still shaken but resolute, stepped forward. "We will. But first, let's just get away from this place." Her eyes flickered with a mix of fear and resolve, and Paige could see the determination hardening within her. Mary Kate, who had been quiet since the séance, finally spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't believe she's gone." Tears glistened in her eyes, but she blinked them away, forcing herself to stand tall. "We need to remember her, not just for what happened here, but for who she was." As they made their way down the overgrown path leading away from the cabin, the sounds of the forest enveloped them. The rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird, the crunch of twigs beneath their feet. Each sound felt amplified, a reminder of the life that continued outside the cabin's oppressive walls. The sun broke through the trees, casting dappled light on the ground, illuminating their path ahead. The journey back to town was filled with an uneasy silence, each friend lost in their thoughts. Paige walked beside Brad, their shoulders brushing occasionally, a silent comfort in the shared grief. She could feel the weight of his guilt, the burden he carried for not being able to save Ashley. "You did everything you could," she said softly, breaking the silence. "We all did." He looked at her, his eyes dark and stormy. "Did we? I should have seen it coming. I should have." "Stop," she interrupted, her voice firmer now. "We can't do this. We can't blame ourselves. We need to focus on what comes next." Brad sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You're right. But it is hard to let go of the what-ifs." Caitlin, overhearing their conversation, chimed in. "We can't change the past, but we can change how we move forward. I want to start painting again. I haven't touched a brush since everything happened." Her voice trembled slightly, but there was a spark of hope in her eyes. Mary Kate smiled faintly, her spirit lifting at Caitlin's words. "That's a great idea. You have so much talent. We should all pursue what we love. It's what Ashley would have wanted." As they reached the edge of the woods, the familiar sight of their town came into view. The quaint houses, the small shops lining Main Street, all seemed to breathe a sigh of relief at the return of the sun. But as they stepped into the light, a chill ran down Paige's spine. Something felt off. "Do you guys feel that?" she asked, glancing around. The air was thick, almost electric, as if the world was holding its breath. "What do you mean?" Brad asked, his brow furrowing. "I don't know. It feels like something is still here. Like the cabin didn't let go of us." She shivered, the memory of the entity's cold grip still fresh in her mind. Mary Kate frowned, her eyes darting to the shadows cast by the trees. "You think it could follow us?" Caitlin shook her head, her voice firm. "No, we faced it. We can't let fear control us anymore. We have to move on." Paige nodded, but the unease lingered. They had faced the darkness, but had they truly escaped it? As they walked into town, the sun shining brightly above them, she couldn't shake the feeling that the road ahead was fraught with more than just the challenges of moving on. Days turned into weeks, and the friends tried to return to their normal lives, but the shadows of the cabin lingered in their minds. Paige threw herself into her studies, determined to excel in her classes and prove to her family that she was more than just a disappointment. She spent long hours in the library, poring over textbooks, but her mind often drifted back to the cabin, to Ashley's laughter, and to the moments they had shared. One evening, as she sat at her desk, the weight of her thoughts pressing down on her, she picked up her phone and texted Brad. "Can we talk?" A few moments later, her phone buzzed. "Sure. Meet me at the cafe." The cafe was a cozy little place on the corner of Main Street, filled with the rich aroma of coffee and the sweet scent of pastries. As Paige entered, she spotted Brad sitting at a corner table, his fingers tapping nervously against the wood. He looked up as she approached, a smile breaking through his tension. "Hey," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "How have you been?" "Busy," she replied, forcing a smile. "But I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened." "About Ashley." Brad's expression darkened. "Me too. I can't shake the feeling that we didn't finish what we started. Like there's still something left unresolved." Paige nodded, her heart racing. "I feel it too. It's like the cabin is still a part of us, and we can't just pretend it didn't happen." "Do you think we should go back?" he asked, his voice low. "Back?" She blinked, taken aback. "You mean to the cabin?" "Yeah. I know it sounds crazy, but maybe we need closure. Maybe we need to confront whatever is still lingering there." Paige considered his words, her mind racing. The idea terrified her, but a part of her felt drawn to it. What if it is too dangerous? "We can't live in fear forever," Brad said, his eyes intense. Chapter 10. Chapter 10. Embracing the unknown. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the familiar streets of their small town. Paige, Brad, Caitlin, and Mary Kate stood together outside the local cafe, the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the crisp autumn air. It had been a week since they left the haunted cabin, a week since Ashley's sacrifice had irrevocably altered the course of their lives. The weight of their shared experience lingered, a palpable tension that hung between them like a thick fog. "Do you think we'll ever really be okay?" Caitlin asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She fiddled with the hem of her sweater, her eyes darting to the ground as if searching for answers in the cracks of the pavement. "I don't know," Brad replied, his brow furrowed. "I mean, we survived, but it feels like we're still in that cabin, doesn't it?" He glanced at Paige, who stood with her arms crossed, staring into the distance as if the answers lay somewhere beyond the horizon. Mary Kate, ever the optimist, stepped forward, her hands clasped together. "We're alive, and we're together. That counts for something, right? We can't let fear control us anymore." Her voice was steady, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her uncertainty. Paige turned to face her friends, her heart heavy with the memories of Ashley's final moments. "We need to talk about what happened. We can't just pretend it didn't change us." The words hung in the air, a challenge and an invitation all at once. As they settled into a corner booth, the cafe buzzed with the chatter of patrons, the clinking of cups, and the hiss of the espresso machine. The warmth enveloped them, but it did little to thaw the chill that had settled in their hearts. They ordered their drinks, the ritual comforting yet surreal, as if they were actors in a play that had taken a dark turn. "Do you think the cabin is really gone?" Caitlin asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What if it is still there, waiting for us to come back?" "Maybe it is not about the cabin," Brad said, leaning forward, his eyes intense. "Maybe it is about what we carry with us. The fear, the guilt. It doesn't just disappear." Mary Kate nodded, her expression thoughtful. "We have to confront it. We can't let it define us. Ashley wouldn't want that." Paige felt a lump form in her throat at the mention of Ashley's name. "She was so brave," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. I wish I could be like her. You are like her, Brad said, his gaze steady. We all are. We just have to find that strength within ourselves. The conversation shifted, the weight of their shared grief slowly transforming into a collective resolve. They spoke of their dreams, their fears, and the paths they wanted to forge. Caitlin revealed her desire to pursue art, a passion she had buried under layers of self-doubt. Mary-Kate spoke of her ambition to start a support group for those struggling with loss, inspired by Ashley's courage. Brad shared his plans to volunteer at the local youth center, hoping to inspire others as Ashley had inspired them. As they talked, the cafe began to fade away, replaced by the echoes of laughter and the warmth of friendship. For the first time since leaving the cabin, Paige felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. She realized that embracing the unknown didn't mean erasing the past. It meant carrying it with them, transforming it into something beautiful. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow through the cafe windows, a shadow of doubt crept back in. What if they couldn't escape the darkness? What if the cabin's legacy haunted them forever? Hey, Brad said, breaking through her thoughts. What if we do something together? Something to honor Ashley, to remind us of what we've overcome. Paige looked up, her heart racing at the idea. Like what? Maybe a weekend retreat. Somewhere we can reconnect with ourselves and each other, away from all this, he suggested, gesturing to the bustling cafe around them. We could go hiking, camping. Anything that gets us out there, facing the unknown. Caitlin's eyes lit up. I love that idea. We can create new memories, ones that celebrate our friendship and Ashley's spirit. Mary-Kate smiled, her enthusiasm infectious. I'm in. It'll be like a fresh start. Paige felt a swell of emotion as she looked at her friends, their faces glowing with excitement. Okay, let's do it. Let's embrace the unknown together. As they finalized their plans, laughter and chatter filled the air, but beneath it all, a sense of unease lingered. The cabin had left its mark on them, and while they were determined to move forward, the shadows of their past still loomed large. The following weekend, they found themselves driving down winding roads, the trees thickening around them as they ventured deeper into the wilderness. The air was crisp, and the scent of pine filled their lungs, a stark contrast to the stale air of the cabin. Paige felt a mix of exhilaration and trepidation as they approached their destination. A cozy cabin nestled by a serene lake, far removed from the horrors they had faced. As they unloaded the car, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the landscape. This place is beautiful, Caitlin said, her eyes wide with wonder. I can already feel the weight lifting. Mary-Kate nodded, her smile bright. Let's make this a weekend to remember. They settled into the cabin, the familiar creaks and groans of the old wood echoing in the silence. As night fell, they gathered around a crackling fire outside, the flames dancing in the darkness. The stars twinkled above them, a vast expanse of possibilities stretching into infinity. Let's share something, Brad suggested, his voice steady. Something we've learned since the cabin. Paige took a deep breath, the warmth of the fire wrapping around her like a comforting blanket. I've learned that it is okay to be vulnerable. I spent so much time trying to be perfect, to meet everyone's expectations. But I realized that being true to myself is what really matters. Caitlin spoke next, her voice soft but firm. I've learned that I can't hide from my passions anymore. I want to create, to express myself, even if it scares me. Mary-Kate smiled, her eyes shining. I've learned that it is okay to lean on others. I don't have to be the strong one all the time. We're stronger together. Brad's gaze flickered to the fire, the flames reflecting in his eyes. I've learned that facing our fears can lead to unexpected strength. I never thought I could confront the darkness, But I did, and it changed me. As they shared their truths, the air around them grew thick with emotion.